I was only 9 years old when this terrifying experience took place. For some reason, I was home alone one evening, a rare occurrence, and I was in my room playing video games on my GameCube, specifically Metroid Prime, a game I was obsessed with at the time. My mom had only gone out for a short while, probably grocery shopping, and she always told me never to answer the door when I was by myself. As I was engrossed in my game, I suddenly heard the house phone ringing downstairs. My mom had always instructed me to pick up the phone if it rang, just in case it was her calling to check on me, so I dashed downstairs to answer it. By the fourth ring, I managed to pick up, and the caller ID showed my mom's cell number. I answered, and she said, "Sweetie, can you come outside and help with the groceries?" Something about her voice immediately felt off. It didn't quite sound like my mom, and even at my young age, I knew something wasn't right. I cautiously responded, "Mom?" To which the voice on the other end replied, "Yes." The voice was off, and my suspicions grew stronger. I asked, "Why do you sound like that?" Her reply was chilling. "Like what, sweetie?" That was all I needed to hear. I hung up immediately. My mom never used the word sweetie like that, especially not twice in a row. The phone rang again, and again the caller ID displayed my mom's number. I ignored it this time, sitting in the kitchen with my heart pounding. After a couple of minutes, the phone rang a third time, but this time the caller ID showed a different number. I hesitated but picked it up. On the other end was a man's voice saying, "Hey James, I know this might sound strange, but it's your dad. I'm outside." A wave of confusion and fear hit me. "What?" I muttered, barely able to speak. The man repeated, "I'm outside. I have a lot to explain." I slammed the phone down. My dad had passed away when I was only 3 years old. I had no memories of him. At that moment, I knew for certain that the earlier call hadn't been from my mom. The phone rang several more times, and I ignored each call. Panic began to set in, not just because someone had my mom's phone, but because they were outside. That fear became reality when I heard knocking at the front door. This wasn't just a case of a stolen phone anymore. Someone was at the house. My mom wouldn't knock. She had a key. I cautiously peered around the wall and saw the front door. A man's muffled voice came from the other side, calling my name and claiming, "It's your dad." He rang the doorbell and then tried to open the door. In a state of pure terror, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the phone and called 911. The operator's calm voice was my lifeline. She asked me a series of questions and instructed me to hide in a room with a lock. I ran to the downstairs bathroom, locking the door and turning off the lights. From inside, I could hear someone outside trying to open the windows. I held my breath as they tried window after window. If even one had been unlocked, things could have ended very differently. After what felt like an eternity, the intruders must have given up because the noise stopped. The operator then told me the police were at the door, and it was safe to come out. Relieved but still shaking, I opened the door to the officers. They quickly searched the house and asked me if I knew anyone who might want to harm us or if my mom had any enemies. I told them I thought she was just grocery shopping. My mom came home shortly afterward, panic-stricken when she saw the police cars outside. It turned out that her phone had been stolen earlier that day, and whoever had taken it used the information stored on it to find our home phone number and other personal details. I don't know how they knew my name, but it was clear they had targeted us, possibly after seeing a photo of my mom, my sister, and me on her phone's screen. They tried to use that stolen information to trick me into coming outside. After this terrifying incident, my mom became much more cautious. She wouldn't leave me alone at night anymore, not until I was older. Looking back, I can't shake the feeling of how close I came to something far worse that night. When my cousin Jake and I were in our early 20s, we used to go on a lot of camping trips around Colorado. This particular trip took place when I was 22 and Jake was 23, and it happened in Arapahoe Forest. It was my first time camping there, although Jake had been there before. We both had jobs that allowed us to take time off during the middle of the week, so we planned our trips around that to avoid the traffic and crowds. I always let Jake take the lead when it came to these camping trips. He was an Eagle Scout after all, and knew his way around the wilderness. We parked by a picnic area and started hiking into the woods, looking for a good spot to set up camp. After about 15 minutes of walking, We found a clearing large enough for our 2 tents, a campfire, and a small stove. The first thing we did was set up our tents. Jake had always been quicker than me when it came to pitching a tent. He could do it in minutes, while it took me a good 20. After setting up camp, we gathered stones to make a fire pit and collected some wood. Jake brought fire starters and a lighter, so we got the fire going easily, even if it felt like cheating a little. It was that perfect time of day when the sun was beginning to set. Jake was grilling steak and burgers, and the smell filled the air. One thing about Jake, he always took food seriously on these trips and made sure we ate like kings. We had bear spray on hand, just in case the scent of the food attracted any unwanted visitors. Jake had always said bears were unlikely to show up, but the real danger, he often reminded me, was other people. As we ate and cracked open a few beers, we blasted some classic rock from a speaker. If you've never been camping, you can't quite appreciate the pure vibe of moments like that. Hanging out with a friend, surrounded by nature, good food, cold beers, and great music. It got dark fast, so we started playing card games by the fire. After a few rounds of traditional cards, we switched to Uno, and that's when we heard something coming from the woods. I paused the music, and we listened. It was the unmistakable sound of someone humming and footsteps crunching on the forest floor. Jake immediately told me to grab the flashlight, but by the time I found it, the sounds had faded into the darkness. I asked Jake if we should be worried, and he said it was definitely strange for someone to be wandering around so deep in the woods, especially without acknowledging our campfire. We both felt uneasy, but we tried to shake it off and continued our card game, keeping the music lower this time. Then, out of nowhere, a large stick came flying into the middle of our campsite, making us both jump. It hadn't fallen from a tree. Someone had thrown it at us. Jake yelled out, telling whoever was out there to leave us alone. We heard footsteps again, this time walking away. I suggested we pack up and find a new spot, but Jake refused, saying it was too dangerous to move around in the dark. Instead, we agreed to keep our bear spray close and take turns staying up to keep watch. Jake offered to take the first shift, so I crawled into my tent and sleeping bag, trying to sleep despite the unsettling atmosphere. Waking up in the middle of the night while camping isn't unusual. It's cold, uncomfortable, and every little sound seems amplified. I woke up, but at first I didn't know why. My head was still foggy from sleep. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A head peering into my tent. At first, I thought it was Jake, maybe waking me up to take my shift on watch. Groggily, I asked, "Jake, is it my turn?" The head didn't respond, and the tent zipper quickly zipped up as the figure backed away. I lay back down for a moment, but then a sudden realization hit me like a freight train. I shot up, listening to the sound of footsteps retreating into the woods. "Jake," I called out, but there was no answer. I unzipped my tent and peeked outside. The fire was out, and Jake wasn't there. Panicking, I rushed to his tent, unzipped it, and found him sound asleep. Chills ran down my spine as I shook him awake, telling him someone had been at our campsite. It took him a moment to process what I was saying, but then he grabbed his bear spray and suggested I sleep in his tent for the rest of the night. I agreed, but needed to grab my sleeping bag from my tent. As I was inside my tent, pulling out the sleeping bag, I heard that same eerie humming coming from the woods. I asked Jake if he could hear it too, and he whispered back for me to hurry. We both zipped ourselves into his tent, bear spray in hand, listening for any other noises. Those next few hours were some of the longest of my life. Every little sound made my heart race, and I wanted nothing more than for daylight to come. I stayed awake while Jake slept, and when he woke me up to switch shifts, it was nearly dawn. By the time we packed up and hiked back to the car, the sun was fully up, but neither of us wanted to stay another night. That experience haunted me for years. I haven't been camping since, and every time Jake brings it up, I find an excuse not to go. The thought of someone out there, lurking in the woods, watching us, still sends shivers down my spine. I don't think I'll ever go camping again. When my friends and I rented a beach house in Florida, I never expected the events that would unfold. There were 4 of us, crammed into a small car, heading down to what was supposed to be a relaxing vacation. The house was perfectly situated, right on the beach with the bay in front, and the ocean literally steps away in the backyard. The houses along this road ranged from massive, luxurious homes to more modest, smaller ones. Ours fell into the latter category. Nothing fancy, but cozy and comfortable with 4 bedrooms, enough for each of us. The houses were spaced far apart, offering a sense of privacy. As we unloaded the car, I noticed something odd. Not a single car passed by the entire time. It was eerily quiet. Inside, the house was decent, clean, modest, and clearly pushing a beach-themed decor. There were seashells, starfish, and even a decorative surfboard propped up behind the TV. The living room looked out onto the back deck, which offered an incredible view of the ocean. It was just a couple of steps down to the sandy beach. I lucked out and got one of the rooms with a beach view. As soon as we were settled in, we hit the beach, of course. We swam, played football, and just relaxed for hours. Surprisingly, the beach was empty except for an older couple far down the shoreline. We practically had the place to ourselves. That evening, we went out for dinner and spent the rest of the night bar hopping. By the time we Ubered back, it was pitch black out. Still riding high from the drinks, we decided to mess around on the beach, playing some late-night football. As I ran after the ball, I noticed something strange in the water. In the dim moonlight reflecting off the ocean, I could make out a figure standing waist-deep in the water. "What the hell is that?" I said out loud, catching the attention of my friends. We all looked and saw the same thing. A person just standing there, still as could be, in the water. It was weird, but we brushed it off. Maybe it was a local going for a midnight swim. After a while, we headed back to the deck, grabbed some beers, and sat around, unwinding. One by one, everyone began heading inside to sleep, leaving just me and my friend Jack outside. I kept glancing toward where we had seen that person earlier, more out of curiosity than anything. At some point, I noticed someone now standing on the beach, staring directly at us. I nudged Jack and said, "That person is still there, just standing." We both stared for a few seconds, and it didn't sit right with us. It was creepy, like they were watching us. Trying to break the tension, I yelled out, "Is everything okay?" Jack gave me a look like I was crazy. The figure didn't respond, just kept standing there. The feeling of being watched sent chills down our spines. Not wanting to deal with it, we went inside. Our other 2 friends, Travis and Luke, were already knocked out, probably from all the drinking. Jack and I decided to turn in for the night as well. It was still pretty early, maybe 12:30 or 1 o'clock a.m., but we were exhausted. Before heading to bed, I looked out my bedroom window for one last glimpse of the ocean. That's when I saw it again. The same person was now standing in front of our deck, staring up at the house. My heart sank. It wasn't just random anymore. This person was following us. The figure was tall, probably male, judging by the build. I called out for Jack, but he didn't answer. I rushed to his room, banging on his door, and dragged him to my window to show him. But by the time we looked out, the figure was gone. I swore to Jack that the person had been standing there, watching us. He believed me, but neither of us was brave enough to go outside and investigate. I shut the blinds, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there. As I lay in bed trying to fall asleep, I was suddenly startled by a light knock on the window. My entire body froze. Moments later, another set of knocks, light, but deliberate. I didn't move. I didn't dare peek through the blinds. My mind was racing with fear. Who was outside? Why were they knocking? Every instinct told me to run, so I bolted out of bed, screaming for everyone to wake up. The others came out of their rooms groggy and confused, but no one was at the window when we checked. We went outside as a group, turning on all the lights, scanning the beach and the front of the house. Nothing. No one. Jack and I explained what had been happening, and we all agreed to keep the lights on outside for the rest of the night. The next day, Jack and I went to the 2 closest neighbors to see if they had experienced anything weird. One of the neighbors told us something that chilled me to the bone. A week earlier, someone had knocked on their door in the middle of the night. When they asked who it was, no one answered, but the knocking continued. They never opened the door. We spent the rest of the day trying to enjoy ourselves, but the unease never fully left. That night was quiet, and we left the following day. I still wonder what would have happened if I had lifted the blinds that night, but something tells me I'm better off not knowing. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed our stories and would like to hear more, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you captivating tales and new content every week. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We appreciate every one of you for being a part of our storytelling journey.